B-Bad and Brandon.
Pretty good.
Excellent. Well, mate, Jan, you know who both we are, but I reckon there might be some people in the world who don't know who you are. They should. So we start off by asking you 21 words, who you are and what you do. So if you could give us a little debrief on yourself, Jan.
Okie doke. I'm an 80-year-old medical ethnographer, and I've been trying to retire, but the work I do is in demand, and I do it voluntarily.
Yep.
And so I've been following some Aboriginal children. They were children in 1996.
Yep.
And now they're young, they're adults in their 30s, and they're in all sorts of complicated situations. And I find that I'm still able to make a difference in some of their lives.
That's unreal, Jan.
Absolutely.
Now, endonographer, did I pronounce it correctly?
Ethnographer. An ethnographer. An ethnographer is somebody who collects stories, but I collect stories in a medical framework, so that I collect stories over generations of an individual and their family, and then I apply to that various medical science that evolves, such as it to do with epigenetics. That is, the genetics, the DNA, the hand down of circumstances, poor health outcomes as a result of people's circumstances in history, and such as a good example is the Dutch hunger winter study, which it was about September 1944, and the Allies tried to end the war and they flew in paratroopers into West Holland, and the initiative failed. So in retaliation, the Germans starved the people of West Holland. About 1947 and thereafter, researchers went in and started looking at the children, the babies that were 3 months old when the hunger strike, and then they put them into 4 groups according to where they were in their development in the uterus, and that was in about September 1944, and the war ended in Europe in about May, I think it was, of 1945. And so we know in that period the 4 groups that were studied according to how the children were developed was able to predict the chronic diseases that those groups would get. They followed them right through, still following some of them today, and they could predict what type of chronic diseases according to what organ in the body of the babies was developing at that time of the trauma. And then more recently, it's when the war ended, in came the liberators, and they had food, chocolates, all sorts of things, which they gave to the people. And then in the following month, we know now that quite a few of those people died from receiving, from going from very low calories during the Dutch hunger winter and the starvation period, that they were killed by having too much food immediately after the starvation. And so when you look at deaths in those months, the couple of months after the Dutch hunger winter finished, that there were extraordinary deaths because of being given food. And
Wow.
I hope I'm making sense here.
Oh, it makes
Am I?
perfect sense, Jan. I think,
Yeah.
how does one get into this sort of field?
Well, you get in through a social science field, and I did my Master of Tropical Health up at UQ, and then I went off to do my PhD working with the women at Cherbourg, and
Yep.
I just, with their help, they helped me all the way. With their help, I recorded their lives and how they saw it. It wasn't how I projected, like sometimes you go into research and you can manipulate it if you like, but this was straight out data on the women and how they told me their histories and how they explained the situations they're now in. And from that, one other researchers, Dr. Ariane Hayes, she was doing her research, but she was living with me at the time. I said, what do you study? And she said, fetal alcohol. And this was about 1999.
Yep.
I said, what's that?
Yeah.
And then I found that so many of the kids I was looking at had been exposed to alcohol before birth. And of course, that has caused an enormous developmental disabilities amongst the children. And as they've grown up, there were kids who went into the youth detention centre, for example, and especially some of the boys when they were 10 years of age. And the system kept them there until they were 17. And then they went into the bigger house if they were still offending. But the little ones, the 10-year-olds that had been exposed to alcohol before birth, they would have been functioning. Their brain would have been functioning maybe at a 3 or 4-year-old. And they were just following the situation that the older kids were teaching them, but with their own functioning could have been only about 3 or 4 years of age, and they're being locked up, and they still are. And so we've been trying to raise the age of criminal offending responsibility up to 14 minimum. Even at 14, a child exposed to alcohol before birth still isn't a teenager. That would still be back, 9 or 10 years of age.
Wow.
And the kids I follow, and it's now their children that I'm following too. So it's like if you steal a car with the big boys, you're all in it together, and you go hooning through the is that a mouse you're looking at?
It's a lizard, Jen.
Oh, that's lovely. Hooning through the community doing burnouts with the police slowly following behind, and all the bigger kids with camera, with phones photographing it. And of course, what these young ones in the stolen car don't realise that for half an hour of glory, they're going to spend 3 or 4 years incarcerated.
Yeah.
They don't put cause and effect together.
And if
But
they don't have
that
that
half hour,
developmental age to match their actual age,
They're not gonna
They're not
understand.
going to make great decisions at that age, are they?
no, then as a matter of fact, they're not going to be able to make great decisions at all. And they tend to follow the leader,
Yep.
the bigger boys. And so often that's the case.
And those older kids perhaps would have exposure to fetal infant alcohol syndrome as well.
Oh, yes, 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 of course, of course. So you've got the bigger kids, and then when the police do get them, they scatter in all directions, but eventually will be hauled before the courts. But I have to tell you, the courts are now starting to realize this. They're starting to realize, but they still have to come down hard on these, because that's what the politicians want, because the voters want to come down hard on these kids. But, you know, there's other ways. It's costing at least $3,500 per day to keep a child in youth detention. But yet we can get them a full-time carer under the NDIS. If we get them diagnosed with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, or FASD as we call it, if we get them a carer, an NDIS carer, there's a lot of money saved, and that carer could pick the child up at home in the morning, take them to school, and then be waiting there in the afternoon then to spend the next X number of hours supervising that child. Yeah.
So you're saying it's actually cheaper to put a carer in place of these children instead of just sending them to a youth detention center?
Yes, yes,
Wow.
yes.
And no doubt probably way better for them.
And that
than stuck in a prison.
100%.
some of those NDIS carers are so good that they can actually keep the children. They'll be able to help them with their homework, but more than that, they'll be able to take them outside and give them activities outside that will, make the child wear them out a bit. The big problem is, you know, they're often second, third, or fourth generation fetal alcohol, and they might live in a house where families party all night. You know, if there's the big problem is alcohol, and it's not just an Indigenous issue, but we really should step right back out and look at what is the problem. The problem is alcohol causes damage, whether it's dad's drinking or mum's drinking, whether it causes problems with the babies. And you may not notice that problem until the child reaches puberty.
Yep.
And then, you know, everything goes upside down. But I think until we can get governments to say, no, we won't take election funding from the alcohol industry, and then also weigh up what the taxes they get from alcohol versus what it's costing them to incarcerate people. I think you'd find it, and also hospitalization of people with alcohol-related chronic diseases, whatever. It is far cheaper to do that. But the alcohol industry in Australia is very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, it's because I think you said you started or come across this back in 1999. Was that right, Jeff?
Yes, when Dr. Lillian Hayes, she wasn't a doctor at the time. She was actually doing it for her honours.
Yep. And
degree.
would you see there's a lot of change between now and then in awareness and people working towards trying to do something about it?
No, Jonny, we're up against brick walls also with the medical fraternity. So many doctors don't want to ask women about their drinking habits. And also they're worried that, not worried, but they can sort of argue that women are not going to be truthful. But you'll find this, as Dr. Doug Shelton, an expert on FASD, down on the Gold Coast, he's a pediatrician who was one of the, I think he was the first in Australia diagnosing FASD. And he can demonstrate very, very smoothly how you fit that question in, that you step out and you've got a tick list and you're saying to the mother, smoking, what type of medications were on, did you drink, putting it in with other environmental factors. And women don't drink to harm their babies. They, it's almost 100% ignorant of what's going to happen. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm a little bit these days. I'm a little bit hard trying to find the right words because in the last 2 years I've had radiation and chemotherapy, but I'm getting thank goodness that didn't happen in my head of the cancer, and I'm in remission, which is wonderful.
It's one of the big challenges you said is there's generations with this. How do you break the cycle of those generations, Jan? What do you think?
Well, I think it's got to be a whole of Australia. Yep. If you can see ads on the television for alcohol, then you can, for every time an alcohol ad comes on, there has to be a warning also of the dangers of alcohol. Yep. So if the alcohol industry wants to advertise, then there should be mandatory that they spend the same length on the ad explaining what the problems could be. And they've got to take action. But they've made in Australia, the alcohol industry, sadly, will have to be shamed into it. And there are so many things going on in other countries, such as what worries me in Australia. One of the big things in North America, they've found that 16% of our babies born exposed to alcohol before birth have congenital cardiac abnormalities. Well, in Australia, the cardiologists just mend the heart defects and never go any further about finding out what caused it. And I think that's the case with a number of things too, like hearing. They say hearing loss, but of course the hearing was never good to start with. And also the teeth. They say, the children have been eating too many lollies and soft drinks. In actual fact, the teeth are quite compromised and the skeleton, but also if you went bit by bit right through, and even the brain. And once we say, you've got to have some of the facial features of someone with fetal alcohol, such as a thin upper lip, a smooth philtrum, that's a bit between the lip and the nose, epicanthal folds in front of the eyes, and things like that. But we know that just one of those is enough to diagnose a child. But we know the majority of children don't have any of those signs.
Yep.
So we've had to change the diagnostic criteria.
How do you test for something like that, Jan?
I'm not doing the testing.
Yep. How do others do that?
Because there are so many people now that are taking it on. Yep. My kids were all quite obviously in their behaviours, reflected in their behaviours, the alcohol. But the Dr. Natasha Reid, a psychologist, has taken on the collaboration I set up I'm thinking about 12, 14 years ago. Yep. I set up the collaboration for alcohol-related developmental disorders under the perinatal research up at UQ Centre for Clinical Research.
Yep.
So Natasha Reid now is running that bigger program over at the Queensland Children's Research Centre. And So she's amazing. So at UQ, she has set up a clinic, a diagnostic service, and she trains anyone who's studying for their undergraduate degree in health, with their physiotherapists or occupational therapists or other allied health people, so that when they finish their undergraduate degree, they're trained in diagnosing fetal alcohol. And she's also set up with Dr. Margaret Pager, an Aboriginal doctor in Mount Isa, and they're replicating it in Dimagee and Mornington, where they choose a team to diagnose and teach them, and it's made up of the all the people who have anything to do with the child.
Yep.
There's the teacher from school, there's a policeman, there's a nurse, there's a doctor, there's a parent carer, and there are others involved with that child, and they're all trained to diagnose, so that, let's say, the doctor leaves town, then it's not going to fall down. The new doctor step into his role. It's just amazing, and this could end up across every town in Queensland, that you have a diagnostic team made up with people like yourself. You could be asked to go on one. You know, this is the way to go, and to make sure to demystify the diagnosis.
And then with more people being diagnosed like that, and more people being able to do that, I guess there'll be more support and a help for those that have it. That'd be right, hey?
And that's exactly right. And you know, especially for country towns, you know, I grew up in bush. I know just how much alcohol is drunk. That's for every event. People come to town with this rodeo, the show, or what it is, and it's, or for any reason, and it's, but even out on stations, the amount of alcohol that's put away is significant, really significant.
And so, Jan, you said you still work in this field voluntarily?
Yes, I do. I'm on a number of, I've just been asked to go on the HATSI ethics committee at the Children's Hospital, and but I've also on a number of other organisations that raise awareness, and especially when Doug Shelton first started diagnosing children, a couple of the parents came up and said, look, these are our kids, we're going to take charge. What should we do? And that's because, you know, we also have to, you know, put things in place at home. And from that came this amazing group, the Queensland FASD group. And it's more than 1,000 strong now. There's probably 100 made up of people like myself, and the rest are all parents and carers, and they are amazing. You know, the what they find, and they share on a closed Facebook line. It might be a case of one of them post on Facebook, we saw the doctor today and he put Jack on such and such a medication. What should I be careful of? And all the other parents can then come in on the Facebook and say, oh, my son was put on that. It worked for 6 weeks, then it didn't work. That sort of thing, you know. It's an amazing group, and you get, it's gold evidence to me, and you get the feedback so much quicker than if I were doing traditional research. It'd be, you know, by the time you've filled out your proposed, your ethics, got your ethics application accepted, and all of these things, 4 years later, you've got a peer-reviewed paper. And it is just so stupid, but it's also criminal in my mind that you're taking that long to identify the really awful things that are impacting children's growth and future.
Absolutely, Jen. And at 80 years young, very young, you're
Yes.
our oldest member to come on the podcast. Is really pretty cool. But it sounds like there's nothing going to slow you down, Jen. You're still, I like how you use the idea of retirement, but what drives you to keep doing this?
I think, Jonny, my brain is active all the time. The other day, when I was visiting the oncologist, who was a lovely bloke, I must tell you this, when I had an oncologist I didn't like, so I sacked him. Anyway, with the help of my GP, because he didn't discuss with me, he just told me what he was going to do. And I didn't want that. It was more radiation. So
Yep.
I said to my GP, we've got to get rid of him.
Yep.
And so she preferred, without a blinking, she had this other fellow in mind. So
Yep.
I go in to see him and I said to him, right, do you mind me calling you Andrew? And he said, not at all, but I'd rather you call me Adam because that's my name. So, yeah. And so that was lovely. And so I had chemo and I'm in remission. And you know, don't have to have another PET scan for another 3 months. So,
Excellent.
and my biomarker for the cancer is right down low. So that's all really, really good. You know, it's wonderful having specialists that you believe in.
Yep.
No, I'm lucky now, you know.
You're still volunteering all this time, whilst, as you said previously, spending the last 2 years in chemo and working through your own battles, yet still continuously providing support, more in research and on all these committee boards. Like, that's insane, Jan.
Well, a few days ago, a barrister emailed me and said, I believe you have information on this particular person. And could you share that with me? And I said, yes. And I went into my files, and there in 2017, I'd written a 2-page letter. You don't make it any longer, better they won't read it. A 2-page letter to a judge about this person. And also I had his doctor's diagnostic report. And so I sent it through the barrister, who was very grateful. I mean, so when someone contacts you, you can't turn that down because you know that you can be effective. My big worry now is that so many of my young ones, and this particular one, have been inside so long, they're institutionalized, and they cannot function outside the jail, outside the prison. They can only function where someone is telling them what to do, what time to get up, etc., what time to report for breakfast. And so when they get out, they can't handle the freedom. And that's one big thing. We've created that. Now we have to create a support service that will keep them. Maybe they need to be kept away from the general public, but they shouldn't be kept away from their family. Their family wants to see them. So we need to find a halfway situation where they don't have to manage their freedom, but they can have their families come in and they can do a lot of things, and it doesn't, and you know, participate in sport or train dogs or work with animals. You know, it's there are so many alternatives to prison, but instead we are building super prisons now, and they're very costly, and because that's what the voters want. The
Mm.
voters want the law to come down heavily on them because they don't understand that you're talking about someone with a brain disability,
Mm.
because that's what FASD affects most, the brain. And so what do you do? And so that's where I see it has to be done by the alcohol industry.
You think
And it has
there
to
has
be
to be
done
some pressure
on-
on the alcohol industry to take some accountability for their own
Yes.
actions?
And it has to be on prime time television.
Mm.
You know, if all the time it has to be that you have to be so careful with young ones, and but also with the older ones, if you want people to be able to function at their best. Like with the kids, I keep telling people, and I still do presentations, that firstly, you must let the child know that they're valued, and then you have to look at the child, find out what they're good at, and you only concentrate on that. There's no point in going into the curriculum and saying, no, this is what I've got to at the end of this year, he's got to have fitted in and done this, and this. Not at all. You know, you'll find that you've got some very innovative and skilled young people if you concentrate on what they are good at. It's not what you want.
Absolutely, Jan. Now, changing a little bit of pace, Jan, because I think another one of your inspiring stories is you started powerlifting in your late 70s.
Yes, that's right. Remember that, and I set the world record because they didn't have one. What a hoot! What a hoot!
But you still got it,
and
though.
of course, yeah, that's right. Thanks to you, Jonny. Thank you very much. I didn't know about competitions or any of that, and I think I could have gone further that day if I'd straightened knocked my knees in, wouldn't I?
Yep, that's exactly right. And I'll always remember I had to sit you down in a quiet space away from the referee so you didn't yell at them, because you were a little bit grumpy about the fact you got red lights on that lift.
Yeah, because I didn't know what it was all about.
I know. I
didn't know.
feared for the referee's safety.
But
Which
then
was-
again, I won, didn't I? Won the public over. And remember the time we were over there? It was a Valhalla for something, and I was lifting, and when I went in on the third time, you said to me, Jonny, now I want some theatrics from the theatre, please. And it brought the house down, didn't it?
Tell everyone what you did.
Well, I went out and I slapped my own face, and
It was the
and
best.
then
I'm trying to find
threw my hands in the air, and it lifted the roof off.
trying to find it.
To date, one of my favorite ever deadlifts I've ever watched, Jan.
Yeah, and it was fun, Jonny, wasn't it fun? And I tell you, I hadn't, if the surgeon operating on my chest hadn't cut my phrenic nerve, I'd still be back there. And so now my phrenic nerve's been cut on the left side of my chest. It's been pretty useless, but bits of it coming back, the upper part of my left lung. But the point is, I've now got a permanently half paralyzed, oh dear,
Lung.
how dreadful. Anyway.
That's all right, Jan.
just
I think
following-
one day we'll get you back under the barbell. That's definitely one of our goals, to get you back.
I'll tell you something though. I can sit, my core strength is brilliant. I can get up off the milk crate without any help from anywhere. And that is fabulous, that core strength remains. And then a friend's dad built me a beautiful little stool
Yep.
for in the garden, and I can get up and off that.
Yep.
And that's been pretty fantastic too.
I always remember when you first started the gym, you said to me, how do I get better at this? And I said, well, you got to practice squatting to something like a milk crate. And I don't know if you remember this, but that next day you happened to acquire a milk crate
That's right.
from
That's-
somewhere. Maybe
That's right, the coffee
more
shop
of a
down the road.
permanent borrowing
milk crate.
situation.
Mm.
And then you began practicing squatting at home every single day.
Yeah. And I have the exercise ball, but it was my larynx that is now half
Paralyzed?
frozen. And so I'm sitting here as I talk, drinking water that has been weighted. All the water I drink now has to be weighted. So
Wow.
it goes, whether it's coffee or tea,
Yep.
so it goes down into my esophagus,
Yep.
and not into this great little right lung that was such a little warrior through all this and kept me alive, even though one stage only 85% of it was working. I was so lucky. And at that time, as I say, the larynx, it mightn't be fully functioning, but I do
Not going to let
I
it.
do value the other half. You know, otherwise I could drown. The other day I bit on a grape and the juice squirted down the larynx. But I thought this was going to be the end, but I managed to get out of that tight situation.
Jan. Oh, Jan, I love it. Mate, I'm going to ask you, Jan, I've got a few questions. They're very random ones. Are you ready for some random questions?
Yes, hit me with it.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to give you 4 words, and then I want you to think of what is the next word. Apple, banana, house, ape.
Ape. Did you say ape?
Ape, as in monkey.
Well, you got a house and a monkey, and you got 2 fruits. God
Yep.
almighty. I don't know. That's beyond me. That's beyond me.
It's too much. All right, this is a bit more of a. This will be an interesting one. What motivates you to work hard, Jan?
Being able to, knowing that I can make a difference.
Yep.
You know, knowing that what I do has got a fair chance of working.
Yep.
And that's pretty damn good, I think.
I agree, Jan. Who was your hero?
Who was my hero? You know, I had a lady in Broken Hill. She ran a girls' hostel straight opposite the high school. She'd been a nurse with John Flynn up at Birdsville, and she was well read, and she was just so inspirational that it led me into my nursing career and then onwards. And she came each year to visit me, even when I was married and living in Papua New Guinea.
Yep.
She came to visit, and
Wow.
just the most amazing lady. And but you know, she could help me with my homework, and yeah, you Lillian Stevenson was her name. I must tell you a story.
Yes.
About her. Her husband was working on either Durham Downs or Nokatunga. I think it was Durham Downs up in the Channel Country.
Yep.
You know, southwest Queensland. And her oldest son was at boarding school in Toowoomba, and she had 2 daughters then, the little ones, at home. And her husband had been out at the cattle mustering camp, and came in, and and she'd gone to bed with the girls, and he was having a drink with another person, and the house caught on fire.
Fuck.
The husband perished in that fire. And I knew he'd perished in the fire, but I didn't know the full story. And apparently the flying doctor couldn't get in. It was too raining and wet. And so the men came in from the mustering camp and they dug the grave, and she wrapped him in his saddlecloth and other things, and she read the funeral, did the funeral readings and everything. And I said to her, I didn't know you did that. She said, I said, why did you do that? She said, because I felt I was the best one to do it. I mean, to bury your own husband, that's phenomenal, isn't it?
Unreal. Now, bit of a different one, Jan. What song would you sing at karaoke night?
You know, I like raunchy stuff like Bette Midler.
Yep.
And I also, something that bells it out a bit. There's one, I Need a Hero. Do you know that song?
Yep.
Yeah. And it's and yeah, that's the sort of thing that I like. I don't like this sort of yeah.
Do you
Not
have a
worried.
nickname, Aunty Jan?
Me,
Yes.
mine, it's only, no, my family doesn't call me Jan or Janet. I've always been Jackie, because I
Jackie.
was the third girl to be born. There are 4 girls.
Yep.
And my dad wanted a boy, so he called me Jack. And then, so I'm still known at home in New South Wales as Jackie Trindle, you know,
Yep.
not Janet Hamill, as Jackie Trindle.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. That's pretty cool. Now, how many pillows do you sleep with at night?
Well, I sleep with a V-shaped one, and the lovely group that are my carers, they brought me a wedge. So I have this wedge and
Yep.
then this U-shaped one, so that I can breathe night to improve my airway.
Yep.
And I also sleep with a CPAP machine,
Yep.
not because I need it for snoring, but because if I get a good night's sleep, I'm better the next day. I didn't have a very good night last night. Must have been the storm around or something.
Now, how long does it take you to get ready in the morning? I imagine an amazing looking human like you just wake up looking good, Jan.
No, I don't. Oh God, you know, there's no way I'd go into a relationship my age. How I look in the mornings is it'd frighten anybody. And anyway, but it used to take me a lot of time because I had to put rollers in my hair and stuff around.
Yep.
Now I've got this short hair. It's
With a mullet.
it's just a matter of, you know, rubbing it with some water and away it goes.
Ready to go. I like it. Now, last question. Who knows you the best, Jan?
Who knows me the best? Good God. I'm just wondering. Maybe my niece and nephew,
Yep.
or my sister Mari.
Yep.
Mari's the second born in our family. And, you know, I call her place home because I'm going home. It means I'm going to Mari's, and she lives just a K out of the town of Warren. And so, yeah, it'd definitely be Mari.
Jan, you've been an absolute pleasure, an absolute pleasure to have on the show. We can't thank you enough for giving up your time and what we can assume is a very busy schedule.
No, that's okay. I've got I'm supposedly terminally ill, and this afternoon the Karuna nurses, one of the Karuna nurses will drop in to see how I'm going. When she rings, I say, I'm fine. I don't need anyone. But if I get sick, they will come look after me at home, and I will never have to go back to hospital again. I was 5 times in hospital in 5 months last year. And then I came home on Christmas Eve, and 2 friends, one was Audrey Demal, who I consider my other daughter. She's from Hopevale, an epidemiologist who works in Cairns with Noel Pearson. She's just wonderful. And then the other one was Inez Carter. Inez's mob are out west of Cunnamulla, there, out Hewlo. And so there they two were. And this is a funny part. I couldn't. I'd had a nasty episode in hospital, and I had to call the code on me, and I was so lucky to survive. Anyway, the funny bit was at night they would put me to bed, and I put my mask on, and they would rub my legs, which were really, really, as the muscles in your leg start to go down, you get terrible pains. So Inez would be there rubbing my legs with hemp oil, and Audrey would be doing my forehead, and I'd be frightened going to bed because I didn't think I was going to wake up in the morning. But it took a couple of weeks for that. What I mean, and Inez stayed 11 weeks looking after me. I mean, how good is that for friendship? And just this amazing cook. And we ran out of hemp oil.
Yep.
Bella Murphy licked it off my legs too.
Jan, we are very glad you're still ticking over and still going strong. And hopefully when you're a bit healthier, we can get you back on the show.
In person,
and we'll do it again. Thanks, Jan.
Thanks, Jan.
Thank you very much for being interested in me. Okay, doke. Check out.
See you, Jan.
Now that ends the podcast. I want to tell you something funny. Jonny, Bella Murphy, I've adopted her out